Hey guys, I'm here with Ben Whitman, an amazing attorney with Clark Fountain. His name's at the end of all those other names. He's here today. We're going to interview him, and we're at the FJA Masters at the Breakers in West Palm, hanging out today, getting some good content and meeting some very cool people. So thanks for being here.
Appreciate glad to be here.
Cool. So tell us a little bit about you, where you're from, where you grew up, and how you ended up in this beautiful state of Florida.
Sure. Well, thank you for having me. Seen and listened to a lot of your podcasts, and definitely honored to be among a lot of awesome people and a lot of great lawyers that have been on. So thank you.
Thank you.
So I'm actually born and raised in Florida. So I grew up in Jacksonville, and I went to undergrad at University of Florida.
Okay.
Went to law school at FSU, and then after I took the bar, moved down to Fort Lauderdale, and now I practice in West Palm Beach, and I live in Jupiter. So I've covered almost the entire state. I've lived here my whole life, and I'm Florida through and through, and very glad to be, and don't have any plans to go anywhere else.
Jacksonville's beautiful, man.
It's a great place and a great place to grow up, and I love going back and visiting, see my family. My dad is a trial lawyer. That's how I got into doing this, and so it's always nice to go back and be there and see our family.
Where in Jacksonville? Because there's a lot of different stereotypes of Jacksonville people, right? You got 40-year-old guys, 50-year-old guys in Jacksonville Beach who surf all day and somehow pay the bills. I don't know.
Well, and I saw, you had Curry Padgett on your show. So, you know, that's one edge of Jacksonville. So I grew up in the Mandarin area.
Oh, okay.
Near the Bowles School, which I didn't attend. I didn't go to the private school, but we grew up nearby, and grew up, until I left after high school.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah. Jacksonville's got a lot of cool, it's really big land wise, and they got a lot of cool spots all over.
The beaches area has really developed into like a world-class area to live and work. And you're right, there are a lot of professionals from all over the country that move to Jacksonville, go to Jacksonville Beach and go, oh my God, if I'd known about this 10 years ago. So it's booming. Yeah.
Yeah. Jacksonville's beautiful. I remember I went to the wrong courthouse. They had shut down the downtown courthouse, moved it a block, and I showed up for this motion for summary judgment. And I was freaked out. I drove like 4.5, 5 hours to get there at 8 a.m. or something. And then I show up at the wrong courthouse. I'm like, is there a holiday? There's no cars here. And I ran over. Then I realized they moved courthouses, and I figured it out. They had a courthouse on the beach once, but it shut down many years ago. But it was a big court. I don't know about beautiful. It was a big courthouse right on the beach.
Well, the new one downtown is beautiful. We were getting ready to pick a jury there. It was supposed to be in February of this year. We went up for the pretrial. I mean, what they've done with that courthouse downtown, the new one is unbelievable. Yeah.
The other location was on the water. I don't know, like it's a bay or intracoastal or whatever, but it was right on the water. It was a gorgeous location. I guess they sold it or something. I don't know. It's a gorgeous courthouse. So awesome. So man, I was just thinking about Jacksonville, how big it is and how amazing it is. Okay, so Florida native, love that. You went all over. What did you do? What was your first job as an attorney?
So in law school, I clerked at a couple different firms doing plaintiff and defense work. And then right out of law school, I worked for a statewide insurance defense firm.
Okay.
And I did that for a couple of years. And I was based in Fort Lauderdale, but I did cases, really most of the work that I did was in Miami. So I was going to Miami almost every day. And I had a couple cases in West Palm and also some others around the state. And it was a great 2 years. I worked for and with some really good lawyers, and some of them, I remain very good friends with some of them, and I'm very happy to have a good relationship with that firm, and have had dozens of cases, and it's always nice to be able to remember working there, and that I learned a lot, and especially seeing the other side of what I do now.
Awesome. And I love that about the practice of law is sometimes you get to be professional and cordial with people, even though they're on the other side of the case. It's not an all-out war, right? It's professionalism, and I like that.
I really like that too, and I will tell you that I think 95% of my cases are easier and nicer because I try really hard to be as professional and cordial as I can. But I'm sure that in the other 5% of cases, the lawyers on the other side would say, oh my God, he was the worst to deal with. I can't even believe that he's saying the word professionalism and it's being recorded.
Yeah.
But I really do. And I've talked with my law partners about it and co-counsel that I've one of my favorite things that I do is being able to co-counsel cases with lawyers that I know from around the country.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I always, when I'm co-counseling with other lawyers outside of the firm, it's easier for me to remind myself, okay, it's not just someone I work with. This is someone at a different firm. And it actually pushes me to try to bend over backwards to be even more professional. And when I'm doing that, I actually find that the result is ultimately better. And that, pushing people on, not giving extensions on deadlines and stuff, it doesn't ever really change the outcome of the case, but it can really change the outcome of how people deal with you and how they perceive, what you think is important. And I'm glad you asked me, because it's forced me to say this out loud and remind myself to always push down that track.
Yeah. Nobody paid me. Nobody told me that you were unprofessional on any cases and paid me to bring this up.
Well, that's
so
good.
Worry.
No, it's good. It's good that you did, and I appreciate it.
No, it's just it's these days being professional as a lawyer sometimes is difficult when you're dealing with other people, certain people.
For sure.
But yeah, anyways, awesome, man. So you handle cases nationwide sometimes, mostly in Florida.
So I would say more than half of my total caseload are cases that are pending in Florida or the incident occurred in Florida. And I would say, 40% is out of state, stuff that's out of state. And that's one of my favorite parts about my practice, is being able to work with lawyers, both my co-counsels out of state and the defense lawyers, and analyzing the legal issues in other jurisdictions, and traveling to those places and going to different courthouses, like you were mentioning. I mean, I've seen some incredible courthouses in the main courthouse in Las Vegas, Nevada. There's some stuff going on there on a regular, on a Monday morning that isn't happening in other places.
Yeah.
And I was part of a team that tried a case in rural Georgia, and it was in the middle of COVID. And we tried that case in it was a very small town, and because of the spacing issues with COVID, we tried it in essentially the gymnasium across the street from the courthouse. So I've gotten to see and do and experience a lot of different things doing cases outside of the state, and that's something that I plan to continue to do.
Cool, awesome. Yeah, I remember when I was a young lawyer, I think I'm an old lawyer now, I don't know. But when I was a young lawyer, I went to the Orlando courthouse. They had the Casey Anthony trial going on, and I was there for a PIP claim, like, $1,000 underpaid bill, and I'm like, what's going on here? This isn't for me. Yeah, it was pretty wild. Some of the stuff you can see that goes on that kind of nobody notices. But so you handle mostly product defect, product liability, consumer safety kind of cases. What types of products do you typically? What kind of product cases do you typically get involved with?
Sure. So most of my practice is automotive defect litigation, which is really
dumb it down for a guy like me.
A fancy legal term for a consumer in an automobile gets hurt by some issue that we always allege and they always deny was created by a mistake or problem in the design process. So when they were making the strength of the roof or setting the sensitivity for when an airbag should deploy or not, that the designer of that particular vehicle or component, their design wasn't right. And they should have made it different or better that would have prevented a specific outcome. Or that during the manufacturing process, the people that were putting this product together, whatever it might be, didn't follow the plans that were given to them, and that caused the product to fail. The last claim that could be brought would be a warnings claim, meaning the particular product doesn't have an appropriate warning. But to go back to your original question, most of the cases that I deal with are related to that context, but with a car. Okay. So we've done cases, again, with airbags that deploy when they're not supposed to, don't deploy when they should. We've done a lot of rollover cases, and when you're dealing with a rollover, it's a really complicated situation, and you're looking at, okay, well, was the vehicle manufactured and designed in a way to make sure that it maintains stability and won't roll? Mm-hmm. And then once in the roll process,
the Bronco.
Exactly. Well, so that litigation happened long before my time, but the same principles apply. Okay, so now it's rolling. What's the strength of the roof panels and the panels and also the pillars that are holding the roof up? Okay. And if they're not made strong enough, then the roof comes in and bad things can happen. Yeah. And so we look at and analyze all those different issues. when we're looking at a case like that. Another thing that comes up a lot, and this is happening more and more recently, everybody knows Florida is booming, and road construction is a huge deal. And we've looked at, analyzed, filed, litigated extensively a lot of cases against companies that are engineering and constructing roadways in the state of Florida that create conditions on the roadway that can lead to a crash.
Yeah.
And evaluating whether the engineers did a good job, and kind of a similar concept to products. Okay, did the engineers do a good job drawing out their plan? And even if they did the construction people holding the plans, did they do it right?
Yeah.
And what the consequences that can flow from that.
Yeah. And, you just reminded me, I had a case where a lady's driving on a road and there's construction on the side of the road. And there's a forklift with the arms like this in the road at my current height. And if she'd been in the passenger seat, I don't know who'd be driving the car, but if there was a passenger in the car, maybe is a better way to put it, they would have been decapitated by these two forklift arms. Her whole car just basically sliced open because she's going like 30 miles an hour, normal speed limit. And the construction workers are like, it's her fault. We didn't do anything. I go, what? But once the cops come, forklift gets moved. But obviously there's evidence of this lady's car getting sliced open. They didn't want to pay. The lady didn't suffer any physical injuries except for the car decelerating. You're driving 1 second, the next minute you're slamming on the brakes. But that could have been a way worse injury. So you handle cases like that, where when you talk about roadway construction, can you give us an example?
Sure. We just finished up on a case where our client's son was a passenger, rear passenger in a family member's car. They were going to a movie, broad daylight on a summer afternoon. And they were driving down a road that was 4 lanes divided by a median.
Okay.
And they were building a roundabout, which is ultimately something that's supposed to make the road safer. Everybody sees these roundabouts, which could be confusing, but ultimately it takes an intersection out of the picture.
When you say a roundabout, you're talking about the circle,
like a traffic circle.
Okay, and you're going, and then you got to turn, and then you can go that way or you go that. Okay,
correct.
Gotcha.
So they were ultimately building a traffic circle, but in order to get that completed, they had to take the 4 lanes divided by the median down to 2 lanes. So you have opposing traffic that, before construction, you have a 65 mile an hour speed limit, and there's a median dividing, and everyone's used to traveling with that space between the vehicles. Well, they take the cars down to 2 lanes right next to each other, and they lowered the speed limit 10 miles an hour, which we contended they should have lowered it much lower. But more importantly, the engineers had a decision to make. And then one of the decisions they had to make was, how are we going to divide the 2 lanes of travel? And there's different options that you can use depending on various circumstances. And they chose to select essentially a 1-inch stripe on the roadway. One of the other options they could have used is a concrete barrier. And a concrete barrier obviously will prevent a vehicle from crossing over. So they didn't choose that. And it happened to also be in a curve in the roadway where it's difficult to control your car. So they're driving down the road and another car just comes flying across the lane and crashes into them. And there was a young man who suffered a severe brain injury. Wow. And we went to battle with the engineers, the construction people. There's other entities involved in a project like that. And we went after all of them. And the case was litigated for several years. We settled it like a week before we were to pick the jury. But we didn't even get to the trial. There were already 2 appeals before we even got to the trial.
Oh, wow.
So it was a hotly litigated case, and of course, they took the position we did nothing wrong. We made all the right decisions, and it was frightening to learn when you peek behind the curtain, when you see a construction site. In your mind, you feel, okay, this is being done by a group of people who know what they're doing. They're using the utmost care. They know that members of the public, kids, school buses, families, everybody's using the roads, and you just have a sense in your mind that it's all done right. And to pull back the curtain and talk to some of these people and depose some of these people, and learn what's actually happening is it can be frightening.
Yeah, especially it's cool what you do, because you're not just representing that one guy who got the brain injury. You're really setting the tone for that whole construction industry. Say, hey man, this guy Ben Whitman, he's going to kill us if we cut corners on the next road project, if we cut corners and somebody gets hurt. So they kind of, You're looking at me like you disagree a little bit, but I guess what I'm thinking is,
only with that they, I don't think that they're worried about me, but there's certainly other lawyers on your podcast they should be way more scared of.
I got you. You're very humble, but yeah.
But let me say something about that, because I know we're here at the FJA, and one of the things that I love about the organization is that together as trial lawyers, we can band together and take one person's case and other people that have had similar cases and try to actually make change. And one of the things I've been talking about with the legislative team, we haven't done it yet because everybody knows the political environment right now is a little tough for plaintiffs' cases. But one of the reasons that these road construction, road design cases get litigated the way they do in Florida is because the legislature, not this term around, but years ago, the legislature passed some very, very specific laws that provide some protections for companies that do road design and construction work in the state of Florida. And so defense lawyers are smart, and they get a hold of these cases and they look and say, hey, there's a special statute that protects my client. And so it just sort of it bakes into the defense mindset of like, we're already protected. And that, I'm glad you brought it up, because what I want to ultimately do is try to get the legislature to consider changing some parts of that statute, because I believe, this is my opinion, that the statute gives these companies and the people making the decisions a feeling of safety of, I can cut corners because if I do get sued, it won't be as bad or as it otherwise could be, or I could get it dismissed on a legal technicality. And that's something that I think really needs to change as it relates to that very narrow issue.
Yeah. Awesome. Wow. That's incredible. And so you handle these defects in the roadways during construction projects. Do you ever handle, because I do a lot of driving all over Florida. I go to Fort Myers once a week. I'm in Miami twice a week. I live here in Delray area and Palm Beach County. And so I'm always on the roads, and I see so many just intersections. Have you driven on Glades Road? That thing's crazy. What are your thoughts on Glades Road? Can you give me a legal opinion on that?
I could give you a legal opinion, but what you really need is an engineer's opinion. And I'm not an engineer.
I hate that intersection so much. They just, for anybody watching this, they just built in Boca Raton, Glades Road, this diamond, I think it's called the diamond intersection or something, where like it's just like an X instead of, you're on the right side of the road. You go from the right side to the left side and then back to the right side. It's Google it, Glades Road intersection, I-95.
Well, there's a lot of, I think what you're asking is, after the construction's done, have we ever handled cases where we say, well, all the construction equipment's gone, the road's being used, without any impediments, like lanes being blocked or trucks being out there, and then, but bad things keep happening, and so maybe the original design was bad. I think that's what you're asking.
Is that what you guys do?
So we've also handled cases like that. I will tell you, those cases are a lot harder because everything's done, and let's say the construction project was finished on January 1st of 2023. And your crash doesn't happen for 2 years. One of the defense arguments is going to be, well, how many millions of cars drove right through that intersection and didn't have a problem? Now that's one issue. The other issue, and I didn't realize I was going to be on my legislative soapbox here, but in the construction world, there is a very recent change to the time limitation to bring a claim against certain entities involved in construction, design, and engineering. And, I understand why the legislature and the industry wanted to change those time limitations. They made them shorter because all sorts of companies were getting sued, long, like 7, 8, 10, 12, 15 years after completing a project. And so they wanted to eliminate some of this potential liability just floating in the ether. And so they lowered the time limitation, or they shortened the time limitation, not from the time of the incident, but from the time the construction was completed. So that means if your project was completed in 2023 and you have an incident that occurs in 2027, 28, 29, whatever it might be, you might have a bar automatically, even if you did have a good design allegation. However, I will say there have been cases, and this wasn't one that I was personally involved in my firm. It was at one of these sort of spaghetti junction highway exits where there's really tight kind of clover leaf as you get off.
Okay.
And the engineers and construction people at that particular area had put a high mass concrete, big, heavy concrete pole, and they put it, as we alleged, improperly too close to the lane. and people were coming off the highway and they would lose control of their car and they would go right into this concrete pole. Boom, their cars would explode. It was horrible. And there were like 3 or 4 different times that happened in a really short period after the construction was totally done. And we represented multiple people, different incidents at different times that had that happen to them. So the design claims post-construction do exist, but there's legal issues and factual issues, but they do exist.
Make them really tough.
They can be tougher.
Yeah. And any other types of products cases that you handle that like are guardrail cases, improper guardrail cases a thing? Or
so there's a lot of litigation on guardrails, and there was so much of certain guardrails used in certain geographic areas. So for example, I know there was a lot in the Southeast United States outside of Florida where there's like Georgia and I think Tennessee or Kentucky, where there were a lot of claims against a really specific manufacturer and model of guardrail. I wasn't involved in that litigation, but that did exist and go on for quite a while. And I think
basically,
So what would happen is that the end of a guardrail is a protective piece. Sometimes can be referred to as a crash pad or an attenuator, and essentially it's so if a vehicle goes into the beginning of what a guardrail is, it's supposed to deflect the vehicle away.
Pushing to the side.
Exactly.
Okay.
And what was happening is that when people were hitting the edge or the beginning or the end of a guardrail, length of guardrail, is that kind of similar to what you were describing in the case you had, is the guardrail would actually go into the vehicle and it would
impale
hurt
somebody, right?
Very bad things would happen. And there was a lot of litigation over that.
Yeah. Okay. And so you mentioned airbags. I get this all the time and I know the answer to it, but I want you to tell me. Airbags, when are they supposed to go off, and is not going off when they should? Is that a case?
So it's funny you bring that up because we have in the past, historically at our firm, we were getting inquiries through the internet on our website, and our firm doesn't, we don't advertise on television or radio. I mean, obviously we have a website, and we were getting these pings from like all over the world about airbags, and my airbags didn't go off. My airbags didn't go off. My airbags didn't go off. And a lot of times people will just think I was in a crash and my airbag didn't go off. So, therefore I have a claim against the vehicle manufacturer. And of course you asked the $1 million question and you asked of a lawyer. So I can't answer it. I can't just say yes or no. But what I can say is that your airbag is not supposed to deploy under every circumstance. But it's not something that's intuitive. There's a lot of things about product defect cases that once you hear them and appreciate them, and just like I know you do a lot of first party work. I wouldn't know the first thing about first party work, but there's things that are intuitive to you, Right. But a lot of people will call and say, well, I got rear-ended on the highway. And my neck hurts, but my airbag didn't go off. Well, your airbag is not designed to deploy if you get hit in the rear. It's only supposed to deploy if one of the sensors in the front or the side is triggered. And then even within that analysis, all the sensors, this kind of came up earlier, they are the sensors for the airbag. They're placed in certain areas on the vehicle, and they're also tuned to a certain sensitivity. So, and the manufacturer will say, well, we're trying to balance, we don't want an airbag to deploy in a situation where it's not needed, because an airbag deploying can cause an injury. So from the manufacturer's perspective, they're deciding when is there enough force in a crash that we want to deploy the airbag so the passenger or driver gets the benefit of it. And we also want to make sure that we don't deploy it too often, because if you're deploying it in a really low speed crash, and it's not going to make any difference, but it could inject some other injury mechanism into the situation, they don't want to do that. So airbag cases are particularly tough. But if you get hit from behind, your airbags and it's supposed to go off. Also, people just think any impact should cause my airbag to go off, and that's not true. You want to see a significant amount of force, the property damage at the front. And the other thing that happens is if it's an off-center hit, or there's all sorts of different things that go into it. But the short non-lawyer non-answer to your question is it's a very unique analysis. But a lawyer that handles those cases and evaluates those cases can look at some photographs of the vehicle, the crash report, understanding injury patterns, and answer that question quickly. Let me add one other thing to that, because this is as a lawyer, if you're evaluating an airbag case, just think back to law school, because we've gotten this question before. They go, My client was involved in a crash and their airbag didn't go off. I said, okay, you're talking about the airbag in the steering wheel, right? That's what we're talking about. The airbag didn't go off. This has got to be a case. Okay, well, what's the injury? Well, bilateral ankle fractures. I go, okay, man, if the airbag went off or didn't go off, does it have anything to do with the ankles? Oh, I guess that's a good point. So, you kind of have to take a step back and think about it, from that perspective too. But airbag cases can be hard to analyze. And anyways, to go back to the website, we were getting all these inquiries, and my partner, Don Fountain, who's been handling airbag cases for a very long time, he said, we're getting so many inquiries that people aren't understanding when their airbags are supposed to go off. I'm going to do a blog post. And he wrote a blog post about here's when your airbag should or shouldn't go off. And the number of inquiries that we got tripled because people were clicking on the blog and they go, oh, they must know about airbags. And so it's kind of funny. It had the reverse effect.
Yeah, that's funny. People just want to jump to the, hey, I want to talk to somebody. It's crazy.
We get that.
Yeah. So, do you guys handle any of the? I don't even know if they're still around. What is it? Takata.
Takata
airbag claims.
So we handled several Takata airbag claims, and we were actually still handling some. And I was actually last week. I was with one of the lawyers that was one of the main counsels for one of the manufacturer defendants involved.
Were you professional?
So it's funny you bring that up. You ask me about mediations, we'll talk about that in a minute. It was very professional interaction. But it came up and we were just talking about the Takata claims and the airbag claims in general. And that was a really incredible period for product liability because there were so many of them. Wasn't my case personally, but our firm actually handled one of the first Takata cases.
Oh, wow.
Before the recalls came out and before everybody knew how bad it was. There was just a person said, hey, my airbag went off and I have shrapnel in my arm. And we were sort of at the forefront of it and no one could appreciate where it was heading, shortly after that. And we also had a case that I worked on, but it wasn't, I try not to take credit for things that aren't mine, but, I've been very blessed to work on a lot of cases with a lot of different lawyers in my firm and out of my firm. And anyways, I was involved in a case where a man had a piece of shrapnel from a defective Takata airbag go into his eye, and he lost one eye. He had another. He was a young man, and people don't appreciate the significance of an eye out injury. I mean, of course, it's a big deal to lose your eye, but it's really, really scary if you lose one because that's it. If you have one functioning eye, and if you take a tennis ball or you fall too hard, I mean, you don't know you could be blind, and it's very scary. And anyways, that we got that case resolved with the manufacturer of the vehicle right before one of the most evil sounding and actually evil things that I've come to know about in the world of automotive defect litigation. So Takata declared bankruptcy. And as part of the bankruptcy, all of the $1,000, $1,500, $2,500 an hour corporate lawyers and bankruptcy lawyers at all the big skyscrapers around the country convinced the bankruptcy court and all the different courts considering the Takata issues to create this thing called a channeling injunction. It sounds bad. It's worse than it sounds. And it basically says, even though normally a consumer would have a claim against the manufacturer of the vehicle and the manufacturer of the airbag, Takata, all of the claims against the vehicle manufacturers got pushed into the bankruptcy. So even though the vehicle manufacturers were solvent, had plenty of money, and had the ability to pay these claims, all Takata-related claims had to go into this fund. So, on a certain day, basically, consumers who had two viable causes of action to recover their damages from, because of this creation of a bankruptcy court, corporate lawyers, and bankruptcy lawyers, one claim was eliminated, and you could only pursue it through a limited fund that was created to settle these cases.
So like just to break it down for anybody, they have a claim against the Toyota, let's say, and a claim against Takata. Toyota has tons of money. Takata went bankrupt, and the court system or whatever said, hey, even though Toyota's got all this money, got to go through the bankrupt company with no money. There's a fund set up, but it's not like going after, I'm just using Toyota as an example.
Sure.
$1 billion enterprise.
Sure.
Wow.
And
okay.
So that's true. And ultimately, I will say at the beginning that it is fundamentally a bad thing. But it ultimately worked out to be okay. We had some clients that were in the fund. And then as time went on, the fund still exists, but there's kind of the door is closing for people to bring new funds, and there's still a certain amount of money in the fund. And so as it's been monitored and been, the people that oversee those funds, they've said, well, we don't think that even if we keep the door open for another X number of years, that all this money is going to get used. So they went back through the grid of everyone who had submitted a claim, and they issued another pro rata payment. So people ended up getting additional compensation. So the system ultimately, I don't want to say worked. People ultimately got compensation, but the fact that this legal entity got created, or this legal tool, the channeling injunction got created. The fact that it just stripped unknowing consumers of their rights just in the blink of an eye was something that I don't forget when I'm litigating cases and I'm trying to think of not just my client, but like you pointed out, everybody.
Right. Wow, that's crazy, man. It's like some of these people concoct just crazy ideas. Johnson & Johnson with the talcum powder. They wanted to file for bankruptcy. I think they got told no.
So I'm certainly not a bankruptcy expert, but I can tell you that I've been following that, and I think you probably know as well as I do that I think that the bankruptcy judges keep telling them no, because the corporation is trying to use bankruptcy as a way, even though they can pay the claims, they're trying to use it as a way to escape liability. And in this instance, it seems like the judges are saying, no, you can't do it.
Yeah, they're just trying to shirk responsibility. To be fair, I don't think Johnson & Johnson, I think they bought a company that ultimately had all this like asbestos chemicals in it, or whatever the powder was in the talcum powder, but it wasn't necessarily a product they made, but they bought that company, and they bought the liabilities, and now they're trying to get out of it by doing a bankruptcy. Yeah.
So you made me think of a case that I had a few years ago. It was a big case for the client and for us, but on a much smaller scale of a smaller business that was trying to use the different types of corporate structures that exist to minimize their liability. It didn't work. So I'm sure you're very familiar with the workers' compensation immunity laws in the state of Florida. And people get hurt at work. It can be very difficult to bring a claim against your employer. And we had a client come to us, and he had worked at a lawn maintenance company on a riding mower, and somehow there was an incident where the mower flipped over, and he had a single leg amputation, like at the hip.
Wow.
You talk about above the knee, below the knee. I mean, this guy had it at the hip, and he was the nicest guy, and he was working. I mean, he was in his 60s or maybe even early 70s, and the guy was just humping it. He was working. He was just a down to earth guy that was working to support his family, and he had this horrible injury. So his case had kind of dragged on, his workers' comp case, and he came and said, "Is there something I can do?" And I said, "Look, you're hurt so bad. I got to look at this." And the company that he worked for was owned by one guy, but the guy had multiple different corporations, different entities, and they all had similar names, but they were different. And so we kept digging and pushing and poking, and all of a sudden the lawyers on the other side, they stopped answering our questions. And I said, okay, we pushed and prodded to a point that they don't want us to find out what's next. And so ultimately it turned out that, and talk about consumer safety, the employer and owner of the lawnmower, they were two different companies, but collectively they made the decision, we're going to sever the safety switch in this mower. The mower is designed so that if your rear end comes off the seat, the blade stops spinning, so you don't have some sort of incident like this. Well, the company said, well, our workers can work faster if we take out the safety device. And the manufacturer of this particular lawnmower was smart, and they made it so that if you cut the cord to the safety device, the mower wouldn't even turn on. So the company had to actually specifically create an override of the safety device behind the safety device. So they made a conscious decision to make this product way less safe than the manufacturer intended. And so then they said, well, we're immune. So because of comp immunity. And then we kept digging and digging. We found the titles of the lawnmower. Well, it was titled to one company, and the guy's paycheck came from another. And so all of a sudden we get a call from an adjuster for a liability, and he goes, I think we have a little problem in this case. And I said, yeah, I think the guy that employs my client who lost his leg got cute, not only on safety, but got cute with the different legal entities, just like on a much smaller scale, these bankruptcy things. And they thought that they were going to be able to limit their liability by having one company own the lawnmowers and one company employ the guys that are using them. And it ended up, the insurance company, it was good for my client. They ended up they paid all their insurance money, and it was a good day for him. But I can't imagine how many people are in those situations where they don't get to the right lawyer. They don't get to someone that's willing to dig and go, I mean, find the title for a lawnmower to find out these different things and then compare the legal names. You know, they all looked exactly alike. And so it's kind of a puzzle putting things together. And that really is what drives me to work every day, is to put that puzzle together, because nothing gives me more satisfaction than helping a client. But really behind that is nothing gives me more satisfaction than solving a puzzle that, you know, other people can't. And I like being able to tell the client, look, you know, thank God you came to us, because we were able to put this together for you. And that really gives me a lot of satisfaction.
No, that's awesome. And it's awesome you have that passion for helping people too. You just reminded me of a guy, he cut off his finger. And, you know, with these regular saws that they have for tile and wood, they'll take off the safety device too. Similar reason. And, you know, unfortunately, he's undocumented. And the funny story about that guy is he had a red MAGA hat on at his mediation. I go, what are you doing with that MAGA hat? He goes, oh, man, if I'm wearing the MAGA hat, they're not going to come look for me. And I go, dude, you're crazy. I couldn't believe it. But I felt horrible for the guy. Normal guy, day laborer, just he would work odd jobs, anything in construction. They'd hire him for the day and give him, you know, $100, $150. Guy lost his finger, and all his friends are hanging out while one of them took video. He's holding his hand and his blood is squirting out, and they're making the decision. This is what I don't like about our country, is they're making the decision. Do we take him to a hospital?
Right, because it might affect our business if we take him in. We don't want to do that.
Yeah, because we hire illegals, and if we take them to the hospital, they'll start asking questions, and they'll ask for work comp, and they didn't have work comp either. And so, you know, luckily we were able to get them something, but there was no insurance involved whatsoever. And you know, it's just kind of like, but there's so many guys. That 1 week, I had 3 people come to me with thumbs that just came off. So maybe I have something on my website about thumb injuries.
Yeah, in your case that you're describing, was a guard removed? Like the manufacturer had an installed guard?
Yeah.
So I'm very blessed at this point in my career to work on a lot of cases that have huge damages profiles and you know, wrongful death, quadriplegia, amputation, and all sorts of other things that are major. And it's always worth sinking your teeth into, and it's worth going that extra mile for people that need that. Well, one of the first cases that I ever brought in before I had ever, you know, really knew what I was doing as a plaintiff's product liability lawyer was a guy who worked at one of the major malls in South Florida. I don't want to get too specific about it, but they were using, and he worked in the food court in one of the restaurants, and it was a removed guard case. They were using a meat grinder, not for meat, but they were using it to mix a lot of things together, and a guard had been removed, and he lost a couple of fingers, which is no doubt a very bad thing, but obviously compared to other cases that we've handled, it's you know. And we went through that whole process, and there was a whole, well, is this a comp claim, and where did you buy this product from, and who removed the guard from it? And the case presented a lot of challenges that I still look back at and use the lessons and the concepts for on a much larger scale. But you reminded me of, you know, we ended up being able to get him a prosthetic. And I still see this client when I go to the mall, and every time I go by and say hi to him, and he's like, you know, thank you so much for helping me. And it's like, I don't get to have that relationship with you know, a lot of clients, and it reminds me, you know, that, you know, there are these really big ones where horrible things happen that, you know, reverberate through generations, and then there are people who get hurt badly that need help too, and that it's a nice reminder of, you know, it was one of the first cases I worked on.
Yeah, awesome. So. Let me just ask you, if people want, let's say somebody suffers a product liability issue, they want to get a hold of you, how can they get in touch with you? You know, what's your website? And if you could just give them some contact info. So they
Sure, absolutely. Well, I'm happy to give out my email to anyone who's watching or listening. My email is bwhitman@clarkfountain.com, bwhitman@clarkfountain.com. And our website is clarkfountain.com. And if you go on there, you can see all the wonderful things that my firm has done. There's, you know, we have 10 lawyers. We who are, you know, my partners are amazing. They have been working together since long before I was an attorney, and learning about and seeing what they've done in Florida and across the country for decades has been amazing and inspiring to me. We also have an incredible team of lawyers who come from a really diverse background, and staff. That's the amazing thing. We have paralegals and other members of our family, of our team, who have been with the group that our firm is now, for 20, 30, 40. I think we had someone retire last year. I want to say I don't know if it was 40. She'd been with the firm for a really long time. So anyways, if you go on the website, you can learn all about us, and my email's on there, and I'm happy to answer any questions that any lawyers have or any clients if they want to contact us. We're happy to review your case. One thing for lawyers and people out there is, just remember, just because one lawyer doesn't think you have a case, doesn't mean that all lawyers will say that. And so it's always worth it to ask to see if someone's willing to look. And we're willing to look. Fortunately, we're willing to look anywhere in the country if the circumstances merit it.
Awesome. Well, thanks for being on the podcast.
Hey, thank you so much for having me.
Thanks.